Good evening, and you're very welcome to the League of Ireland Women's podcast here on finalwhistle.ie with, as always, myself, Breifne Earley, and joining us again, as usual, 101 shows we make it now, and we're going to do a count every week. It's Aaron Clarke of the WNL show. I better get that one right as well.
So what are we saying? We're going to end at 102, are we?
No, we might get a few more out of it other than that. How's your weekend been? Plenty of football, of course, the quarterfinals of the All-Ireland League or Cup, not a league, it's a cup. A little bit of a league to it. So the quarterfinals of that, and we're back into league action this weekend.
So I need to stop you there, right?
Okay.
In the last 2 weeks, you must have given this cup competition.
Oh, it's about 15
about 10 different names at least. Can you not pick one?
I'll do my best, but I am only human. First of all, we're on a different night this week. We were supposed to go last night, and for reasons I might tell you in just a few moments, we didn't go last night. We've pushed it to tonight, but we're going to try and get it out earlier in the week just to make it a little bit more relevant to the previous weekend's action, which we spend most of our time talking about. Anyways, the actual football we want to chat about here. But your weekend, how was it, Aaron? Did you get to a game?
Yeah, I went to Shell's Street. It was nice. I sat over on the riverside, where the standing fences are. I just sat there watching the game. Do you know what was actually really nice for the fact that I had an absolute mare of a week with work, and it was nice just to go and sit on the sideline. And I ended up watching the second half with a couple of people, and it was more just having a general conversation where it's like you couldn't care. It's as if you don't really remember. Sort of, you're just at a football game chilling, and it's nice to be able to do that, especially with this season being manic, and I haven't got to as many games as I would have liked. As much as I've watched a lot of them, it's nice just to get out and watch a game.
Well, I've been doing something similar in terms of getting out and about, and I had tickets to a gig on Sunday night in Dublin. So went up to Dublin with my 14-year-old nephew. That's going to be important in the story, to visit the Ivy Gardens. Lovely venue for a gig. Train. I'm sure you know some of the songs. Hey Soul Sister, Drops
Yeah.
Anyone over a certain age knows them. Might not necessarily know the name of the band, but they know the songs. I'm a bit of a fan. I've seen them every time they've been in Ireland. So went along to the gig, had a great night. Nephew, who's kind of started going to gigs with me his summer, we kind of become gig buddies, and it's been really fun hanging out with him and kind of getting to know my nephew and whatever. So we went to the gig, and he was so excited and so impressed with the gig. He said, I suggested as a joke we go to Limerick last night to see them. They were playing again, and he was like, oh, okay. So yeah, it got dismissed. But then yesterday morning we got up, we are having a chat, and I said, you know what, actually, feck it, we just go to Limerick and go see the gig. So we bought tickets, got in the car, headed off for Limerick, and we're really excited, looking forward to the gig. Get there. Long story short, we get stopped. It's over 18s. He's only 14. So we're at the gate with 2.5 hour trip. We're facing into 2.5 hours, 3 hours home. Absolutely gutted the pair of us. So we just sit down across from King John's Castle, which is obviously where the treaty was signed. That's where it's kind of relevant to the show. I was talking off air beforehand. But we're gutted. And then all of a sudden, what do we see? Only the band. We're about an hour and a half before the show. The gates have just opened. There's a few people around, but not many. The band just walk out of their rehearsal space or their tour bus or whatever they're on, and they're walking towards us to go around the back in the artist entrance. And so I just said, do you know what, feck it, I'm just going to say hello. I like the band. I'll never get a chance to meet this guy again. So walk up to the lead singer, Pat Monahan, and go, hey, was in Dublin last night, really loved the show, came down, but unfortunately my nephew's too young, so we're not going to make the show tonight, but enjoy it, looking forward to maybe hearing you from outside. And he goes, what age is he? And I says 14. He goes, it's 21s. I says, no, 18s. And he said, leave it with me. And he disappears with the rest of the band. And I was like, I don't know if he's going to come back. He might do, but probably unlikely. So myself and my nephew were sitting there chatting, going, what we do next? We go to the cinema, we go for food, we go home. Couldn't really make our minds up. Somebody came over and said, oh, we saw you couldn't get in. We're looking for 2 tickets. Would you sell your tickets? So I was like, okay. So sold our tickets. I got most of the money back for it. So the night wasn't going to be a complete mess. And we're just about to leave, just about to make our mind up about what we're going to do. And my nephew goes, the band are coming back. And he comes over. The band keeps going. He stops and comes over to chat and said, listen, they're not being really great about it. They don't really want to let underage in at all. But I'm still working on it. Don't go anywhere. 10 minutes later, bouncer comes over. You two come with me. And he brings us in. We get backstage in with the band, had the best night ever. It was absolutely class, and turned what would have been an absolutely horrific night into a great night. So yeah, I got led into a backstage of a 3-time Grammy winning musical artist that I kind of like.
Do you know what? I'm going to say this to you. If it had been the case we didn't record last night and this story had turned out you didn't get in, you wouldn't have heard the end of it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So yeah, what could have been the worst possible planned excursion on a recce short on a like last minute decision to go to a gig could have been terrible, but actually we got to get in and hang with the band and hang with the support act and his family and stuff like that. It was pretty cool. We had a really good night. But anyway, not such a good weekend for Treaty themselves. Maybe let's start at that game. You were in Talca Park. 6-0 was the final scoreline. It just didn't really happen for them, did it? They just didn't show up. A couple of defensive mistakes, but hopefully from their point of view, they got all the yips out in the one weekend.
Yeah, I would say it's, and I said this to offer, and I've said this to a few people, it's the best I've seen Shells play. Even Kate Mooney not involved, had a little niggle. It was the Shells were just so free flowing. I think realistically, if you look at that league table, if they'd have been playing against most teams, I think they'd have done that to them. Yes, Treaty weren't amazing. Defensively were quite poor. But I think Shells were just that good. We need to talk about the first goal.
Yeah.
Jess Gargan's run was just unbelievable.
The goal was great. It's the pass, the assist from Noelle Murray. One touch, just flicks it over the defense coming out, straight into get Jess Gargan's pass, and she's running onto it and just buries it. Like, probably the goal of the season so far for me. It's up there.
Yeah, it's right up there. Do you know what? And it's typical Noelle, because I remember against Galway a couple of years ago, but it was her herself done it. Flicked it over first Galway defender, flicked it over another Galway defender, and then volleys it into the corner. Like it was just one of them moments that you're sort of looking at it thinking, like the ball was just perfect, and Jess kept her run going lovely, and then boom, nice composure to finish. Like you look at that, that's 1-0. They scored twice. What late in the first half, then to sort of bring it into 3-0 at halftime. At 3-0, you're sort of thinking it's dead and buried nearly. Like Noelle scored in the 44th minute, and Mackenzie in the 45 plus 3. Like even for Treaty, they'd lost Madeline Robbins in the first half through a head injury. Like it was going from bad to worse, and then Shells just come out in the second half doing what Shells have done all season and just put them away. And like I had a little chat with Sean Russell after the game, and he just said it wasn't their day. They didn't perform, and Shells could have probably scored more goals if they really wanted. And I think for Treaty, it's the first time we've seen this year that they've really taken a beating. And like I'd said to you previously in the lead up to these sort of games, that if Treaty were to have any chance in this game, they'd probably need to be on a 9 out of 10, and Shells have an off day. But they were probably at about a 4 out of 10, and that's being probably generous to Treaty, I think.
And Shells probably 9.5 out of 10 as well.
And I've been one of Treaty's biggest supporters this year in terms of this podcast, and giving them a lot of credit, but just wasn't good enough on the day, and they just have to go back, regroup, and sort of look to see can they get a couple of results in the league as they build up towards that FAI Cup quarter final against DLO Waves.
Final question on the game, because we're not going to dwell on it for too long, but Megan Smith Lynch, injury time goal, crosser shot.
Anybody says it was a shot. The funny thing is, she'll tell you it's a shot. It's a cross all day long. Like you look where it is, it's about 8 yards out where she's not going for goal there, and keeper was never getting anywhere near her. Good to see her back. Let's talk about the negatives of this. There's two for me, okay, of this game. One, Megan played this game. Shells didn't even announce that she returned until a day later when they put up an interview. Like, to me, that's not good enough. That sort of thing should be, yes, I know they're busy building up to the Men's Champions League games, but that should be announced. They've known this was happening. Once the trial paperwork come through, that should be announced. And the second thing, which is even more annoying and more frustrating, is 2 weeks in a row, no commentary on it. Like the comment, if you had a good commentary on that game, that Jess Gargan moment is going all over social media. Whereas if you look at it right now, don't even know if the video was. I don't even know if the actual video that the goal was put up online during the game. I don't think it was. You know what I mean? And like that should be that should be one of them moments that we're looking and being like, let's capture this, let's get it out there. But you know, it wasn't even.
But it goes back to what we spoke about in the show last week about, and I went on a bit of a rant last week. Honestly, it's the most feedback I've ever got on a show in 5 years of doing this. And in fact, in anything we've done in Final Whistle, bar maybe the Mickey O'Connor interview that went absolutely nuts after the Cup final a couple of years ago, this was potentially the most feedback we've ever got for an episode of this podcast. And 99% of it positively agreeing with us, like from figures around the league. And go back and listen to last week's show. I'm not going to regurgitate it now, but I think it's to bring it down to brass tacks. It's about setting standards, and that's simple enough to do. Get a commentator on the game. You're charging for the stream. When the first season or two, when it was free, I could understand you not having maybe the same attention to detail on it, but you need to set the standards, and that's a basic one.
If you cannot get somebody in your club to volunteer to do it, if you have to pay somebody, pay them.
Yeah.
If you have to go and pay somebody to do it, pay them to do it, because the thing about it is you wouldn't see a League of Ireland club, a men's League of Ireland game being left out of the commentator.
There have been some situations, but it's nearly always lastminute.com.
But like, it's
2 weeks in a row is unforgivable.
It's about the respect of, like, you look at them players on that pitch on Saturday. How many of that Shell's team have won? I think most of them have probably won 4. I've won 4 League of Ireland titles. I've won FAI Cups, League Cups. I've won everything that's to win in women's football. And for them not to have a commentator every 2 weeks in a row, I just think, to me, it's not good enough. I am going to turn around, though, on a bit more of a positive note, because I did see this on social media, but I can't seem to find it right now. The FAI are actually currently searching for a new League of Ireland director who will have a lot of influence, or a lot of.
You haven't sacked Mark Scanlon just yet. League of Ireland executive officer.
Sorry. Yeah. Listen, I think I think a lot of Mark's work is great. I think the fact that they're going to have an executive come in there and do work and have a good focus on the Women's League of Ireland as well, I think is massive.
It seems to be kind of a helping role within the men's, but nearly taking responsibility for the women's, which is great to see that kind of role.
I'd love to apply for something like that.
Well, do. Absolutely. I'm sure you'll get a vote or two. 1 or 2 people specifically, actually, in the feedback I got from last week's show, we're talking about references to the women's head of women's football role, and kind of asking who in the right mind would actually even want that job based on all the stuff that's coming out of the FAI at the moment. I think there are people out there who would do it. I think if, as long as you stay away from what the upper echelons of the organization, and particularly the volunteers in the organization, want, which is the international trips, I think you'll be let off to your own devices. I think you could do serious good work for grassroots sports, for the League of Ireland, for the amateur cups, by almost staying away from the international game completely and let them off with it. That look after itself. But focused on the other stuff, I think anyone who's involved in the game would love to take that role, despite the bit of a basket case that is in Abbottstown at the moment. Yeah, anything else on that from your point of view?
No, no, not really in terms of that. Listen, I enjoyed the game.
If you need a reference, Aaron, I can definitely sort you out for a reference. Although I'm not sure how much weight that'll carry in the corridors of power in Abbottstown. Let's move over to Galway United. Shamrock Rovers in town. First game post the loss of Katie Keane and Roisha. In terms of this competition, they'll be disappointed. Although what really impressed me, they lost 3-1 in the end. Keola Bergen hat-trick / Summer Lawless OG. We're not quite sure. It's been credited to Summer as an OG for the third goal. A bit of a question mark. The third goal, I think it's a free out. I think there's a bit of a barging situation. Ball knocked into the empty net after Summer comes out and claims it. Does she drop it? Is it knocked out of her hands? I would probably give a free out in that situation, but then I was a goalkeeper, so the keepers union sticking up for each other.
But that's a complete different. We talked last week about Summer Lawless and about how the Waterford defender or the Waterford attacker sort of pushed her all the way across the goal for the Waterford goal, where she just sort of moved her across. Like, this is a completely different situation. When I looked at it, I was like, there's no way Summer Lawless just pushes that into her own net. And like, if she's got the ball in her hands and Keola Bergen has sort of headed it out of her hands, has to be a free. I think when Summer Lawless probably looks back at this game, it's probably one that she won't really want to look back on an awful lot. I think the first goal is sort of a bit of a carbon copy to what Chloe Maloney done for Peamount the week before. Just got a bit too comfortable with the ball at her feet, and then when the ball was robbed by Bergen was only going to score when there's no one else there, and then set plays though, Breifne. Goal number 2 and goal number 3 both come from set plays. We've started seeing a little bit of that creeping in, not just like we've talked about Cork, we've talked about Waterford, Shamrock Rovers as well. We're starting to see that little bit of issues in defending set plays coming into play, and maybe a little bit of a concern with Colin O'Neill.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's something that's been a problem for them all season, and it's good to see them kind of. I tell you what, I was really impressed, and I genuinely mean really impressed with Shamrock Rovers at the weekend when they got their goal. And again, question marks over all of that in terms of how that was handled. 100% a goal, very clearly goes in, hits the back of the side netting, and then rolls out. And then I'm not quite sure because the camera kind of pans, but from the highlights I was watching, and I was watching it live at the time, I think I was texting you, but the attitude of Shamrock Rovers, 3-1 down with 6 or 7 minutes to go, they looked like they wanted it. And for a secondary or third competition in the year, I know they got to the final last year, but for the kind of lower level competitions that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of a little bit of icing on the cake for the season. They look like they actually wanted to win that game, even at 3-1 down. So I think that for me, I was very impressed with their application and their attitude in the closing stages of the game.
Even if you look at though when they were 2-0 down, you know, Anya has a chance that hits the post. If Anya scores that and then it goes 2-1 with 30 minutes to go, you're probably talking it's a completely different game of football at that stage. And like I think, like when we look at Shamrock Rovers, like they've got the bones of a good team. It's just, and it's something like I said to you at the start of the season when you laughed at me when I said they'd finish 7th, is the depth. I just think that's a bit of a concern for me. Like when you look at they've obviously lost Katie and Rusha. Like when you look at the actual depth of their squad, it's not that deep. And I think Colin O'Neill may really look at this transfer window, because if you look at the bench the weekends, young Katie O'Reilly, Katie Comiskey, Aoife Brophy and Emily Corbett are probably the 2 players that everybody recognises. Otherwise, the rest of them are really, really young players. And I think that's probably where Collie is suffering in them, in the sense of doesn't necessarily have the players to come on off the bench and change the game.
Yeah, and I suppose, sorry, yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Talking about strength and depth, and we look at Galway, Ceola Bergen, she impressed us at Wexford in recent seasons. She's gone to Galway, hasn't quite gone her way in recent months. She had a good run of the team at the start of the season back. She played the bulk of the first 3 games of the season, 3 wins, and then she's barely played 90 minutes. I don't think she's played 90 minutes until she started at the weekend. So from the
she's only featured in 5 league. She had to be. I think she was injured, Breifne, because
she's on the bench. She's on the bench for all of these games, so I don't know whether it's she's
only played 5 times. She's played 5 times in the league. She's only played 314 minutes, which is not a lot of game time, and especially considering, as you say, the first 3 games she'd sort of started them, and like didn't play in the FAI Cup, played in the FAI Cup game, played 8 minutes against Shells. Yeah. 63 minutes again this week. It'll be interesting to understand, you know, what's going on there, if there was some sort of niggle or something that sort of really held their back a bit.
But we've talked about her on the show extensively over the last few years. Happy to see her back. Happy to see her in form, even if they're probably some of the easiest goals she'll ever score. You got to be happy to see a promising young player back on form like that.
Yeah, and especially like you look at that Ireland 19s team last year that qualified for the Euros. She was part of that squad as well and was doing well. Like you're looking at the likes of herself, Joy Ralph, Emma Doherty. They're the next sort of young kids or younger kids who are going to potentially be the ones to make that step when it comes to things like Ireland. Kelly Brady probably a couple of years older. Like otherwise, you're thinking striker wise, Kate Mooney's probably his mid-20s. The younger players now, and I think they're the ones that are gonna have to lead the league for the next couple of years. And I think for Kyla, it's a little bit as well of Emma Doherty just being playing very well. And I think that's sort of that's one of them it's difficult when you see players like that playing well, because it makes it harder for her to sort of get in the team. And
it's a nice problem for Phil.
Of course, for Phil, it's a lovely problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move down to Wexford. Of course, they've been thereabouts over the last few years in this competition as well, beaten in the semi-final by Galway, I think, last year on penalties. They've got themselves back in the semi-final. A solid performance, if a little bit uninspiring, but it doesn't matter. You get through a quarter-final, that's all that matters. Ciara Rossiter with the goal, just coming up to half-time. They'll be happy enough. 1-0 over Peamount. It's always a good job when you get the victory against the Peas.
Yeah, and it was one of these games that we'd sort of said last week that there wasn't going to be an awful lot between the two sides, and it turned out again. It was Ciara Rossiter's goal, the only thing that changed. That it was a nice finish for Rossiter. I think for Wexford, it's really good for them to have her back at this time of the year and start as well. Ella Malloy coming back. Like, I still, if I'm the Wexford management, I'm still looking back at that Bowes FAI Cup game sort of with a little bit of resentment, the fact that they had to play without Ella Malloy, because that was probably a massive missed opportunity for them to have a decent cup run. And they'll look at this competition thinking, you know what, we need to win something this year. This is an opportunity for us to win something into the final four. Like, these two sides, they're very, very evenly matched. Like, the only thing I would say is both sides have a lot of young players in their squad, and when it comes to these games, it's experience sometimes win, and that's what we've seen when it came to Ciara Rossiter. What more can we say? I don't think she
You can't call her Owl Ciara Rossiter. I know you don't mean it as in old, but you can't say that.
No, I mean, yeah, you know what I mean. I'm not mean old. Like,
Ciara Rossiter's just me. As long as she knows,
Ciara Rossiter's just Ciara Rossiter, and Ciara Rossiter's been doing this for the last 10 years or so. And like, when she's not in that Wexford team, you really notice that she's not in that Wexford team, and it's great to see Rossi back on form. From a Peamount viewpoint, obviously disappointing to lose, especially having to show the character last week that they had to show against Cork in the FAI Cup. It's just Peamount frustrate me, because they beating Cork at sort of ended a run of three games in all competitions where they hadn't won a game, and then they go out and lose. Like, I don't want to sound disrespectful when I say this, but I don't think necessarily Peamount are the Peamount of old. No Karen Duggan struggling to fill their bench. It's difficult times for Peamount at the minute, and like, the one thing you would sort of hope when it comes to a Peamount viewpoint is that they don't lose any players in the window, because I don't think they really can afford to lose any players. The squad is quite light at the minute.
Well, Dervla Byrne's involvement with Leitrim wraps up this weekend, so she may be available for them going forward, which will be, I like signing a new player with the experience she brings into that team as well, and the bit of speed and agility that comes with that. Interesting times for Peamount. Can they pull themselves back up the league table in the coming weeks? I suppose they've little to no distractions from here on in, so just the cup, obviously, which coming up in the next few weeks, and they have a home tie against.
Interesting. Dervla Byrne has played so many games for Peamount already this season. Well, she's played one game for Peamount this year already. She played 120 minutes in that FAI Cup game against Cork. So, yeah, you're right in making that impact. Can they get themselves back up the table? That's difficult, because you look at it, and yes, they've got a game this weekend that they'll probably fancy getting a result against, but other than that, like, the other teams in the league are so, how would you say, like, okay, take this game away. They've got DLR Waves this weekend. Then they've got Shelbourne, Galway, Wexford before they play Athlone in the Cup. Like, that's a ruthless run of games. That's a ruthless run of games. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't even say it's a nail-on guarantee that they're going to beat DLR this weekend, with the way their form is at the minute. And that's something that I probably wouldn't have said at the start of the season, but I'm not 100% convinced they're nail-on to beat DLR.
Yeah, even a couple of weeks ago, you mightn't have said that. Let's move on to the final round of the final game of the round, which was, of course, the visit of Bohemians to Glentoran. We had hoped that the sole Northern Ireland representatives, the NIFL champions Glentoran, would be moving into the next round purely from the sake of the overall look of the competition. But Bohemians hadn't read the script. 2 goals from Lisa Murphy, one very early on, another one from Hannah O'Brien, left them 2-0 up in the first quarter of an hour, and really it never really looked like Glentoran were going to get back into this game. I watched the second half, and it was all Bows really. They never really looked like Glentoran were going to get themselves back in and challenge for a place in the semi-final.
I'll talk about the Bows goals now in a second, but I was really impressed with the goal from Glentoran. The build up and the way the ball went forward and the pass across the goal. I was really impressed with it. Lisa Murphy just continues to be Lisa Murphy this season. She's having a great season for them, scoring a lot of goals this season. That's her. I assume she's probably up thereabouts, joint top scorer in this competition this year. I'd assume she's 3 goals in the 3 games. I think she'd be thereabouts.
Joy Roth has 3, and Anya O'Gorman has 3. Emily Wilson, Mackenzie Anthony, and Ella Malloy. Mackenzie Anthony has 4 actually. Joy Roth has 4. So yeah.
So she's one off. But her first header was a lovely header. Absolute bullet of a header. Hannah O'Brien then getting her first senior goal for Bows. She's somebody I think we're going to have to really watch over the next year or so. And then if I'm Glentoran, I'm probably frustrated or I'm probably annoyed with Lisa Murphy's second goal. The second header. When it bounces into the ground, player on the line. To me, that has to be cleared and that has to be got out of there. And then it could be a different game. But I think Alban Heise has got that little bit of magic working. Like if you look at Bow's results in the last period of time, they've lost the treaty where it was a 90th minute in the league, 90th minute cracker from Katie Lawley, lost 1-0 to Rovers, drew with Shells in the All Ireland Cup. They're winning a lot more games now.
Yeah, there is one other player on 4 who I better include in that list before I have to make an apology next week. Phenomenal record of scoring in her career, 100 plus games in the Women's League of Ireland. Can you name her? Who's got 4 goals in this competition that we haven't named already?
Noelle Murray?
Nope, but you're close.
100 plus goals in this competition.
100 plus games. 10 goals, 12 goals across career for them in this season's All Ireland Sports Cup. Scored at the weekend twice.
Jess Gargan?
Yeah, Jess Gargan. She 2 earlier in the competition, so unbelievable record from her as well with 4 goals in this. So that's, or have I got that right?
She's been playing wing back. She's been having fun. Yeah, for me, I would have said Glentoran were for favourites going into this game. I would have said Glentoran were the team to beat. I know Alban Heise sort of said that in his I think it was either his post match or his pre match interview with the Bohemians socials that Glentoran would have been favourites, but I think the Bows performance sort of rewarded them with the result that they got. Listen, he's got to be really, really happy. He's into the semi-finals of this cup. He's got a nice draw in the quarterfinals of the FAI Cup, and they're starting to build a bit of momentum in the league as well. And like, what more? I think from a Bows viewpoint, I think the last 6 weeks, or since May, I think they've definitely come on an awful lot, and Heise is getting a lot out of that young side. Like I said to you, we started chatting about Alban at the start of the year, and I sort of said there is a bit of pressure on him this year because of the fact that Bows have had a lot of investment in their team over the last couple of years. But like, realistically, if he can get to either an FAI Cup or an All Ireland Cup final and potentially win a trophy, like that would be massive for Bows. Absolutely massive for them.
Yeah, but it's also justification in terms of the investment that's gone in and the time and effort that's gone in. I think it'd be huge for where they are at the moment. However, that being said, I think there's an element of Bows that doesn't really matter. And I don't mean that to sound kind of flippant about it, but Bows have different priorities as a club. From the management of the club down, maybe then your traditional club where it's 100% about the result. Yeah, they want to win. Yeah, they want to get across the white line with all 3 points when they're leaving the ground. But I think the bigger picture matters in Bows more so than in other clubs.
Yeah, I also think they've had a bit of a they had a great week with week or two with the launch of the Oasis jersey, but then they had the other
Rough
side of it, the negative side of it, then with the Workplace Relations Commission dispute with Dave Henderson, and like
It's never good
for,
when the person gets full allowable maximum in the
no.
Workplace Relations Commission. It's not a good look.
And you know what? You know what? And I'm not going to bash balls on this, but it's good to see the media outlets picking up on the things that they haven't done well as giving them all the praise that they have. Because I think that's a side of it that we see with women's football. It's starting to happen a little bit more where the good is being picked up, but also when the bad is being picked up as well. And I think
Yeah,
it's a vice versa.
well, it's very hard to be, even on this podcast, it's very hard to kind of criticize individual players. We see a goalkeeper make a mistake, we see a defender make a mistake, gives away a goal. But I think it's more respectful to the player to go, well, actually, you weren't at your best there. And I think it gives you more credibility when you say she had a stunning game, when you're prepared to criticize them when things don't go well. And like, if you want to be treated like men's football, this happens in the men's game all the time. You want to be treated like men's football, you got to kind of get the rough with the smooth, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely agree. Just in terms of the All Ireland Cup this weekend, though, Breifne, like the one thing for me, and I know it's summertime. I know it's All Ireland Cup, but like some of the attendances weren't great as well this weekend, and like the Shells game. And no, I don't want to sound bad on Kristen Sample because I know she's doing a lot of great work to get people through the gate, but it was nearly dead. Watching back bits of some of the other games, there wasn't great atmospheres of the All Ireland Cup. I'm not sure whether the fans have necessarily bought into the All Ireland Cup. I love the competition. I think the fact of having the cross border thing for me is great. Granted, it's not as high in the priorities as the FAI Cup, but I think it's a great competition. And like if you look at Galway United, like that's into their third semi final in a row. They're the only team to win it. You know, you look at how much pride they would have if they could retain that trophy again.
I am concerned that there's no sponsor this year. I'm concerned that there is lacking attendances. I'm concerned that they're not bothering to post the highlights on YouTube. There's a lot of things that are concerning about how this competition's been treated. I personally love it. I think anything that gives clubs the opportunity to play against new faces, new names, new stadiums, new trips, new stopping points. Like, we maybe don't see that side of the game when you're just a fan and you're watching, but like where these girls stop to maybe get food on the way, or where they stop maybe to get waters or whatever petrol station or restaurant it might be along the way, that all adds to the experience of being in the league. And I think if you're going to a different location, if you're coming from Cork or Waterford and you're going to Belfast or Derry or Coleraine or wherever you might be over the years in this competition, Lisburn, I think you're making different stops along the way. The day is different. It's a different feel to it. You're playing players you don't know, you can't recognize, you haven't seen on pitches every season, 2 or 3 times a season for the last X number of years. So for me, I think it's key. I think sometimes we fall into that problem with a lot of these competitions, that they're not specifically one organization pushing it, and the North are maybe waiting for the South to do something, and the South are waiting for the North to do something, and there's a bit of uncertainty, maybe not necessarily at the executive level, but definitely when you get up to the kind of board level, just waiting to see what budgets are like and what the political landscape is like across the border. And it does differ from time to time. But I think this is something I'd love to see retained. But
I have a question for you.
the right direction it's
Okay?
going.
And I've been thinking about this the last couple of minutes. Like realistically, I know that the final venue is not necessarily just chosen until the very end. Should it be a case that no matter what, say one season they come to an agreement, the final is in, say, Tala one year, it's in
Windsor
maybe
Park.
Windsor or the O, and the sort of no matter what, whether you're in it or not, you know, whether it's two Dublin teams having to play up north,
If it's
or
Treaty
two
in
League
Waterford
One
or
teams,
Treaty in Cork, if it's 2
like
months, still go. It's like the Olympics. You don't get to pick where the Olympics is. You don't get to pick where the World Cup is. It's set in stone. And I think I'd be worried about the lack of interest in the competitive nature of the women's sides. We haven't seen a women's side from the North in 2 years make the final. So since Cliftonville back in 23,
back in the original
no Northern
final.
side has made the final. Now we've nobody even in the semi-final. I think we'd won last year. I can't remember off the top of my head who it was. It might have been Cliftonville as well. And now we're looking at no Northern team in the last 4. And I think as we see the numbers get bigger, it's now 12-4, what had been 11-5. I think we're going to get to the stage where to survive, it's going to have to go to a 20-team competition, and everybody from the north is going to have to be in it.
I've said that. I've said that since year one. Though I don't like the idea of all the League of Ireland teams being in it, and then only a handful of Northern teams being in it. I prefer them all to be in it. And the problem is like the top teams in the north are a lot more competitive than the bottom teams in the north. Like even when it comes to the finals, obviously we know where the semi-finals are going to be, with Bows hosting Shells and Galway hosting Wexford. But then you're probably thinking it's either the winners of them 2 games. They'll probably either toss a coin, pick a venue, whether it's going to be in Dublin or it's going to be either in Galway or Wexford. I can't imagine it being in a neutral venue. I think the FAI will probably be happy for one of the clubs to host it.
The other option is you go to Athlone and it's central for everybody. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit of a pain in the ass for everyone to get to in some respects, unless you're Dublin or Galway. But for me, don't get me wrong, I think the cross-border competition is great. For me, I would love to see a cross-border competition, have a chat with UEFA, come up with something like the Benelux countries had back in the day, where you've got a cross-border competition. The North keep their European spot, the Republic keep their European spot, and you're playing against each other. Have a division of 12, maybe 3 or 4 from the North, 8 or 9 from the South, based on kind of current standings, current form. And then relegation works on a regional basis. So your Division 2 might have all the other teams from the North, which would be 4 or 5 teams rolled in with potentially, and no disrespect to any of these teams, but they are where they are in the league table at the moment, with a new Donegal team, possibly a Drogheda or Dundalk team, maybe a Longford team if they were to come along, and Sligo Rovers. And all of a sudden, you've got a competitive second division in the north half of the island, and the same in the south. You have a couple of neutral.
Question.
Yep.
And this is something I read on social media today. Are Finn Harps potentially preparing to come into the League of Ireland with this swap to an Astro pitch with the fact that they're going to go to an Astro for more, so that they can have more use of the pitch, because you know the way it gets up. And
yeah, Derry had the same situation where they went to an Astro, and now everything happens. Dundalk the same. I don't like the Astros, but I see
I hate them.
I see the business sense behind them, and it makes an awful lot of sense. But like ideally, you'd have a second location with an Astro on it, where you can do all your trainings and play all your secondary games, all your underage games, whatever, and have the 2 senior teams in the main stadium. But Finn Harps, they've a lot of trouble with grounds up there. I'm an owner of Finn Harps. Did you buy into it when they launched their shares last year?
No, you bought. The one thing I have done is I've actually quite often have actually bought Finn Harps match programs, though. I've done that several times.
Well, I get them free every week in my email because I'm a
No,
member.
I don't do that. Don't do that. If I'm gonna buy a match program, I want you to deliver me the hard copy of the match program. I'll pay the postage and packaging.
Yeah. I do like that whole thing. I only signed up for it recently. I wasn't in the original thing, but just the continuous pushing of that program. I think it's quite cheap. I think it's probably too cheap for it to have a meaningful effect in terms of how the club runs. But they just want bodies on board. They want bodies supported, and I like how they do that end of things. I get constant emails as a fan, and I feel they just do it better than other clubs I've seen. Apologies to clubs I haven't engaged with in that respect, but Finn Harps for me,
25 quid a year.
yeah, it's very, very good. I can't fault it at all. And you get told about everything that's going on. You get an email about, and I just find it's really well organized.
That's actually.
I'd recommend it to anybody. Anyone who's listening, wants to support a team, feels like they want a bit of an ownership. You really have very little say. Don't get me wrong. You're not really an owner of the club, but you are a part of the organization. There's a few clubs. Bows have a similar model. It's a bit more expensive. Sligo Rovers have a similar model. It's a bit more expensive again. But wherever you want to go, there are a couple of clubs that you can actually just buy into and have a say. It's a very small say, but it's a say nonetheless. That is the games from last weekend, really, in terms of where we're going. The cup draw, of course, has been settled on that. Bohemians will play Shells, North Dublin Derby. They're, of course, playing in the league this weekend as well. And Galway United will host Wexford in a repeat of last year's semi-final. Went to penalties. We all remember the expletive-laden outbursts of, I think it was Jenna Slattery at the time, but it was definitely went down well on social media all over the place. Just to confirm that is the draw. For this here is the draw of the thing. You can see there, Glentoran, Bohemians. They move on to play Shelbourne, Galway, will move on to play Wexford. Full-time scores there as well. Moving on to this weekend's fixtures, Aaron, some really exciting games. This looks like Derby Day across most of the country. We have one in Connacht and Sligo, and we'll travel to Galway. Shells will host Bohemians. It just seems to be Derby Day all over the place, really. Cork and Trady down in Munster. Sorry, have I got that right? I don't think I have that right.
No, you've slightly wrong.
Waterford and Cork. Sorry, I was looking. I flipped to the wrong page. Waterford, Cork, Shells, Bows, Galway, Sligo, Wexford and Athlone, Sligo United and Shamrock Rovers with, of course, one game on Sunday, which is DLR Waves and Peamount.
I actually didn't realise that was on. I forgot that was on Sunday until I seen something earlier that it was on Sunday. That could potentially be an old Sunday afternoon.
A day out.
Galvin to the UCD Bowl. I wasn't even thinking about that game on Sunday. It's only when I looked at it, I was like, yeah, that could be really doable. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the Dublin Derby, Shells and Bows.
The last derby between the sides in the league was one of the most enjoyable games of football that I've watched, where Shells won 7-2. Probably should never have been 7-2. It was just one of them games that had everything. I'm going to probably be a bit of a dampener on people. Not a hope this one finishes 7-2. I think it'll be a little bit less scoring. Shells obviously come in, still haven't dropped points since they lost to Shamrock Rovers the opening day of the season. Bows are coming into this on quite a good run of form. I don't necessarily think Bows need to win this game for what they're doing, but I just think Bows need to put in another good performance. I would expect them to do so. But from a Shells viewpoint, I think Shells are going to win the game. I think Bows will make it difficult for them. I think like that Bows side, they're just starting to click together. They're starting to gel together. They're starting to score more goals and they're starting to put results. Your only concern when it comes to Bows is the lack of clean sheets. Yeah. Like they hadn't kept a clean sheet in 2, 4, 6, 9 games. So again, Shells who are free scorer, and I would expect Shells to probably score 2 or 3. The case is, can Bows match them? It'll be difficult, but it'll be a game that I think that the likes of Hannah O'Brien, Hannah Healy's, Ava Brennan's, these sort of young players will relish, even your Katie McCarran's, they'll relish this sort of game. Shells should be too strong for them, but I would fully expect Bows to put up a really, really good performance.
Yeah, interesting times ahead for all in Bows. If they could take a scalp this weekend, it would really help their chances of staying with that middle group of teams in the league table at the moment. Let's go to Trady Shamrock Rovers. It's the TV game. It's on TG Cahir on Saturday evening from the Markets Field. 7:35 kickoff, as usual, for all the TG Cahir live broadcasts. Both teams on paper fairly even, 18 points each in the league. Rovers with that game in hand, but given form, even though both teams lost last weekend, you'd kind of have to fancy that Shamrock Rovers have a really good chance of taking an away win here, based on how Trady have been over the last week or two.
But what is form? That's the question. What is form? That's the question. Because if you look at Shamrock Rovers this season, you compare against some of the results in the league. Shamrock Rovers beat Shells. Trady lost to Shells. Shamrock Rovers lost to Galway. Trady beat Galway.
Yeah.
I definitely think last week's performance from Trady was just one of them. If they are to get a result in this game, I think they're going to need their top players to be on their A game. I don't want to disrespect Shamrock Rovers when I say this, but Shamrock Rovers aren't the strongest. Shamrock Rovers aren't that strong at the minute, and even when we looked there earlier on, their bench. If Trady can keep this sort of close, I think Trady have a better bench than Shamrock Rovers. I do, but the question is if Rovers score 1 or 2, Rovers could score 4 or 5. But I think it's more of a case of if Trady can keep it close for long periods and sort of get into the game, I think the second half they'll have opportunities. But I definitely think Shamrock Rovers are favourites for the game. And on paper, yeah, I'd agree with Shamrock Rovers should win the game. But I even think Trady are a better team than the two sides when they met earlier in the season in the downpours in Tala, where I think if Trady had taken 1 or 2 of them chances in the first half, it could have been a different story. If I'm to throw it, if I'm to nail my colours, I think it'll be a draw.
Okay. Moving down to Carrick Park, Athlone Town champions in town in Wexford. Can third place beat first and give Shelbourne the initiative in the title race? Can Wexford keep themselves alive in that? Or are they already gone?
I think they're already gone. And I know people won't like me saying that, but I think they're already gone. I think this is the start of a run for Athlone where they play Wexford, Galway, Treaty, Bows, then the Peamount in the Cup, and then they play Shells. I think these next 5 games for Athlone are massive. I think Athlone will come out on top here. If Athlone let LMLI pull the strings, I think Wexford could get something out of the game, but I think realistically, I just think Athlone should get all 3 points and sort of continue to keep that pressure on Shells.
Galway, 4th place at the moment. They play Sligo Rovers, currently languishing in 11th. There's always a bit of bite, though, in a Connacht Derby, and Sligo always seem to lift it a bit more for appearances against Galway. Can they sneak it in Ireland at the weekend?
Sligo are frustrating.
That's
because they've shown us some absolute brilliant moments. But they haven't been able to put it on a run. They haven't been able to be consistent. I think Galway have sort of Galway know they had that patch in the league that it wasn't good enough where they lost to they drew up they lost a Treaty, Shells and Athlone 3 weeks in a row. You'd have to say Galway should be winning this game. If Galway want to finish in the top 3, Galway have to win. Galway have to win this game. I think Galway will win this game. I think Steve Feeney's side will make it difficult for a period of time, and then I think as the game goes on, I wouldn't be surprised if Galway just pull away.
No, I probably have to agree with that as well. I think Galway should have the strength to overcome Sligo at the weekend.
The only thing I will say though, if Sligo get an early goal, then it gets very interesting. I still think Sligo's defensive performance against Peamount was one of the best defensive performances that we've seen this season.
Yeah, and they have the players like Ciara Flynn has impressed me in stages this year. Bonnie McKiernan has definitely impressed me through the season. So if they show up and they're on form and they do get that bit of a break at the start, you never quite know how it's going to pan out for them. It's usually a backs to the wall type thing with them, but they are capable of pulling that off. In terms of the final game,
before you move on, right? I have a question for you on this. Now, I know a lot of people would have said, yeah, you'd fancy them to beat DLR Waves when they played in the league and the cup. Are Sligo Rovers a better team when they're having to defend more and sort of when they're having to backs against the wall and counter compared to where maybe they're probably expected to sort of drive on a little bit more? Like you see with Ireland, where Ireland play contagious against the big teams and then against the weaker teams where they're sort of expected to drive the attack, and Sligo maybe just necessarily can't adjust it because when they're playing majority of the teams in the league, they're having to defend an awful lot more.
I think you're probably onto something there, and I think maybe Sligo, the resources that Sligo have on the field are kind of set up for that. Like Emma Hansberry and Myrne Devaney are probably their 2 strongest players at this current season, and both are that kind of 6 role. They're both kind of slight playmakers. Yes, they can play that end of the game, but really they're really good defensive midfielders, and one of them maybe might push into the 8 when they're both on the field together. But they're lacking that little bit of creativity up front that allows them to kind of control games, and they don't really have that. But on the break, they can be absolutely lethal. And some of those youngsters that are playing for them now, Anna McDaniel and a few others, we saw Emma Doherty do it, Casey Howe do it before them. They're capable of taking chances when they get them. Maybe not as clinically as you'd like them to be from Steve Feeney's point of view, but they definitely can find the net. They know how to score, and they've got a bit of a threat from set pieces as well. Hansberry's delivery is phenomenally good. And there are players who can get ahead on a ball and direct it goalwards. And then once you do that, everything else is kind of up to the gods, really, in some respects. So I think they're probably better equipped to deal with that that defensive mindset and quick break, quick break. Their men's team plays like it. A lot of their underage teams play like that as well. We've seen players over the years, the Johnny Kennys of this world. Even he's slightly different now in terms of what's going on at the moment with Owen Elding, who's kind of the perfect player at the moment at 18 years of age. It's crazy watching how good he is. And we've seen those players in Sligo in the women's side of things. Emma Doherty, Casey Howe, as we mentioned.
Could Sligo struggle over the next year or so to keep hold of the likes of Anna McDaniels and even young McIntyre off the bench, another youngster off the bench, McIntyre, because I think they, for me, have been superb when they've come on. And I think that could be an issue for Sligo as well going forward, is can they keep hold of these strong?
I think there's a few issues at play, and I think geopolitics is probably a big one, which sounds crazy when you talk about football, but the actual reality of being 16, 17, 18 in the northwest of Ireland and the educational opportunities that are out there. Yes, IT Sligo or ATU Sligo as it is now is an option, but it wouldn't be the first option for a lot of people around here because of the nature of the courses they do. They have a lot of practical stuff. There's a lot of level 7 stuff. There's a few level 8 courses, but if you want to be certain professions, you don't have a choice but to leave the northwest. And in practical terms, we do see a couple of girls who commute and play for Sligo, living and working in other places in the country. There's a few girls that currently living in Dublin that names escape me right now, but they're able to kind of keep that balance going and driving out to Sligo for training, or they're making their own arrangements.
Louise Masterson's a prime example.
Yeah, and
she actually hasn't been in any. I'd actually wonder if she even still with Sligo Rovers, because she hasn't been in any squads for them at all this season.
And Emer Lafferty is the one that springs to mind. She's working and living in Dublin and training in Sligo and playing in Sligo. So it's a huge commitment. And people, when you're passing 3 or 4 clubs, like if you're working in the city centre of Dublin, you're effectively passing Shells, Bows, Peamount. Athlone potentially is closer to you as well to play at this level of the game. So it's hard to keep those players in without cost. And I'm pretty sure Sligo don't have a massive budget, if any budget at all, for that kind of stuff. So it becomes difficult. And so
I remember even years ago, like Heather Payne, her mother and father bringing her up and down to Dublin to try and be, because she was to play with Peamount, and like you've even seen Lisa Castley doing it with Peamount at a stage as well, and even just on what you were saying about the educational stuff, like even with the likes of Sive Doyle, moved to the capital. Another option who was with Galway first studies and stuff like that. Like I think a lot of it has to be, what can they offer, what can they do to sort of keep them players there. And
if you don't have a big budget, you can't offer a whole pile. Like you only have to look at. Now I know the Sligo girls from my involvement there a couple of years ago. So you look at the likes of Muireann Devaney, who went to Galway and Athlone. She went to Galway for college, but played in Athlone because it was easier to get to. She's now at home, so she's playing with Sligo. And Roisin Malloy, the same, went to Athlone for college. Even Laurie Ryan, coming up from Clare to play with Athlone, was working in Athlone IT. Now she's out for other reasons this year. But these girls go away and then they create their own situations in those locations. So whether it's work or study or partners or whatever it might be, or just familiarity with living there for 2 or 3 years, and I'm away from the parents, of a bit of anonymity and the stuff that comes with all of that at that stage of life. So in Sligo, it's very, very difficult to get these girls in. They brought in Morgan Burlop this year, an American girl. Don't really know too much about her. She's a little bit raw. She's been reasonably good when I've seen her playing, but she's had limited game time. But they need to bring in a higher quality or maybe a higher quantity of players coming in over the next
Speaking of American girls, I had a chat with Owen Wirren at the weekends, and we were finished doing the interview and we were just walking off the pitch chatting, and he was saying to me, like, when he signs Mackenzie Anthony, it wasn't just one of these punts where it was like, let's bring in an American forward. His friend had actually coached her in America.
Yeah,
he knew her very well. He knew her well before he brought her in. Like, and the problem we see with the league is sometimes these sort of players come in because they get recommended by somebody, and it doesn't necessarily work out in the league. And then you're sort of thinking, they've come in here, come a long way, haven't played a lot of football, necessarily isn't working. Whereas, like, it's probably on paper, you're probably looking at 1 in every 5, 1 in every 6 probably really, really works and really sets the league alight.
Well, I think Treaty is a good example, and obviously there's a personal connection there with the CEO Akira and who she knows and her network, and it's coming in like that with personal recommendations. I know when we spoke to Isabella Flacchini on this show, she was very supportive of Kira and the relationship that she's built up with Kira over a period of time, and I think we're seeing that. I know Phil Trill has extensive work done on NCAA in terms of players that are playing there and potential targets. And I know he's done a lot of scouting in that network himself. We've spoken about it. And I think that's a definite opportunity. Like Athlone have brought in some really good players, and most of it seems to have come from Madison Gibson, to be honest. When she came in first, a whole host of her former teammates came in, and they all made an impact in a positive way in terms of how that's gone. She stayed for 3 seasons. That's bizarre enough in itself. And again, we talked about having partnerships and having boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever it might be within the communities that they're living in. And she's, of course, dating one of the Galway United League of Ireland players.
Who there's a lot of talk about could potentially going to be looked at for a move this summer. He ends up in the capital. The next transfer window will be very interesting at the end of the year.
You see that this is the reality of the women's game. The money just isn't quite there, so you gotta make decisions for other reasons. You're not making them for purely financial reasons. So, and that's, I think, to go back to your original question, I think that's why Sligo will probably always struggle to a certain extent. The population is small, so you're not generating the same quantity of quality players. There are a few coming through. There's definitely loads of them dotted throughout that team. They're lucky in that Mayo don't have a team, Donegal don't have a team. But if Donegal were to come up with a team, or we were to see a re-emergence of a Castlebar or a Mayo-based side in the future, there's very good work been done underage there by Raf Kataro and a couple of other people within Mayo FC. I'd be worried. I'd be worried for Sligo in terms of how competitive they might be in the short term. There's a really good.
It's all about. The biggest thing when it comes to Sligo is they need to keep every single one of them youngsters that come through. That's whereas you look at, say, and I said it on the show last week, Shells can afford to let the sort of players go out and be like, okay, we've more youngsters. Because I asked Warren at the weekend, I sort of said to him, you have a small enough squad, and he's like, are you going to bring anybody else in? And his more attention turned to, I've 3 or 4 under 19s knocking on the door, almost ready to go, who will be next in line. Whereas if a team who are second in the league, probably joint favourites for the league, favourites for the All Ireland Cup, joint favourites for the FAI Cup at the minute, and you're probably with Athlone, and you're thinking he says he doesn't need it because he thinks he's more younger players ready to go. That's where the luxuries for the likes of the Shells are compared to where Sligo know that if they get 1, maybe 2 out of every underage class that finishes at 19s, they need to keep them in order for them to be successful. They're going to need to have, and it's difficult, and it's
probably unrealistic, unfortunately. Let's take a quick look at the league table, which of course sees Athlone Town going to the weekend. Probably really the start of the second round of games here, with most teams haven't played 11, a couple of back games to be played, of course, that weren't played due to weather at various stages through the season. Athlone lead from 1 point from Shells. Wexford, they, of course, play Athlone this weekend. They're 6 points behind the leaders with that 1 game extra played. Galway, Shamrock Rovers, Treaty, 1 point separates the 3 of them going into the weekend's fixtures, where, of course, Treaty host Shamrock Rovers. Peamount and Bows, 13 points and 10 points respectively. And then a kind of a group of 4 teams propping up the table at the moment. Cork City on 7, Waterford on 6, Sligo Rovers on 5, with DLR finally off the mark in recent weeks, 4 points for them. Waterford, of course, though, hosting Cork City at the weekend, Aaron. Interesting to see how they are going to be faced. If they win, they could kind of give a bit of a gap between themselves and the other 3 at the bottom there.
It was a massive, massive defeat when they played them the last time. Like, when you're looking from a Cork viewpoint, these are the sort of games that Cork have to target. It's the sort of one where you're thinking Cork City have to win, and probably have to win comfortably. This is the last time Cork City have won in the league. It's when they beat Waterford 4-2 in Turner's Cross. I definitely think Waterford are a better team, just with that bit more experience. But Waterford's a bit of a slump that they've been on. The defeat to Galway has probably sat there and lingered for periods.
Yeah, it's interesting times ahead in the league. Of course, loads of games this weekend. Do get a chance to get out to a game or maybe watch one on TG Car. And of course, Sunday afternoon in UCD sounds like a good way to spend a couple of hours watching Peamount and DLR Waves do battle on Sunday afternoon. That game kicking off at 3 o'clock. But wherever you are, enjoy the game. We'll be back with you again next week to talk about all things Women's Premier Division across the entire, the weekend's action. Talk to you then. Thanks a million, Aaron.